As I step into the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California, the beating heart of Silicon Valley, I'm hit with an overwhelming sense of awe. This isn't just part of my whirlwind trip for Operation Entar Explosion, our bold mission to rocket Entar from a real estate powerhouse into the trillion-dollar titan of the future, fusing cutting-edge AI with property and finance to outpace the explosive growth of artificial intelligence. No, this visit is a pilgrimage to the very cradle of human ingenuity, where the sparks of innovation that reshaped the world are preserved in all their glory. And let me tell you, this isn't merely the best computer museum on the planet, it's the greatest museum in existence, bar none. A temple to mankind's most dramatic achievements, where every exhibit feels like a miracle.
These are called sectors. I have heard of a slide rule. They used those just before I was in school. The generation before me used slide rules. This arithmeter looks pretty cool. It's pretty sophisticated. 1869 computer. Between the book and your brain, you have a computer. How does the logarithm book work?
I don't actually think that that's a table of logarithms. It's something else, but basically you look at the numbers on the left-hand side, the number on the right-hand side, and you get a logarithm of it, and then you can add logarithms together to multiply numbers.
Fantastic. So you have a woman on the left defending the world, and men on the right trying to take over the world. The slide rules. Before electronic computers, they were using sorts of measuring devices, including the quadrant. Difference between a sector and a quadrant.
There can only be 4 quadrants to something, and there's an infinite number of sectors.
Here's a fantastic calculator before electronics, 1623. Terrific mechanical calculator or electronic. That one can fit in your pocket. That one looks handy dandy. Almost electronic, but not quite. Oh, the abacus. So the abacus is what was mostly used as a calculator around the world, all the way up until 1960. And they're still used today. Here's one that has a calculator.
I have no idea how to use it.
So Dick had one of these in elementary school, but probably not the Russian version. Or Ukrainian. And I had one of these that I bought for $3 from a thrift store in 1980 maybe. It was lots of fun, and it was very loud because it's electromechanical.
F365.
Dick had one of those, and everyone who was nerdy in 1979, 1980 had one of those. The Babbage difference engine. This is one of the most important pre-electronic computers. Hand-cranked calculator. That's very advanced technology. 1821. The Antikythera mechanism. This one I keep trying to look up, but no one seems to know everything about it. Maybe they know about it now. How did it work? Interconnected gear wheels and dials. Many of them remain just mysterious, but we know the machine tracked the moon's irregular motion to make precise predictions based on the solar system and Babylonian astrology. It's a prediction machine. A dial follows the ancient prediction cycle called the Saros cycle. If you have an eclipse in 1 month and you look 223 months later, you get a very similar eclipse. Whether it's the sun or the moon, this repeats. It goes on for 12 or 15 centuries, a remarkable cycle. That's the Antikythera mechanism. You needed to know the lunar cycles to be able to do the best farming and so forth. Predicting the high tide and low tide for fishing as well. Card sorter, cards punched, 300 cards per minute. So this must have been electric, but that's important to distinguish between hand-cranked and electric-powered. These all look like they must have been electric-powered. Yes. There we go, electric cord. So we're now into the electric mechanical computers, or adding machines, or tabulating machines. And we're getting close to the old-fashioned punched card machines that I used. I'm sure we'll see those. Here's those Brits showing off on how fancy they were with computers since 1962. So IBM was quite busy doing punch cards for computation. I remember they kind of invented the punch cards and computers in a big way for the census, the United States Census. Was that in 1925? 1925, 1940, United States, worldwide. IBM was doing quite a bit with computers. But we see the key punches. I want to see the computers from 1930 to 1940. But at that time, I think the key punch, hole punch, and readers that pretty much was computers of 1930 to 1940. 1890, so they were using punch holes like crazy already. Since 1890, when my great-grandmother was born, they were using punch hole computers, although they were pretty darn manual back then. Not quite so automatic. I guess they were only semi-automatic. So in 1890 census, they used little meters to read one hole at a time, kind of semi-manually, what word would you use for that? Not automatic, but semi-mechanically, we should say. There's one of the first time clocks from 1913. People could clock in and clock out. And I'm sure they messed it up, flubbed it up, and often forgot to clock in and clock out, just like people do today. That's why we finally have automatic clocking in and automatic clocking out, because humans never did remember when to clock in and clock out. So everybody would get in trouble for the last 100 years for forgetting to clock in and out. More IBM computing accounting machine. There we go, there's the actual cards. And they created several types of different codes to use with the cards. And this is something like what I first used in 1978 to program mainframe computers at California State University, Long Beach. Similar punch cards were used to control looms to make fancy patterns for rugs way before 1980, but I guess they're still used in the 80s. When I was a kid in the 1970s, we received our phone bill that came with a punch card, and you would return that punch card with your check so they could run the punch card through their computers and to automatically enter in your information and give you credit for your payment. So the ENIAC was the first famous large electric computer. 1946, took up an entire room, and it could probably do basically just basic calculations for the most part. Maybe you could do a tiny bit of logic. Never heard of the Nordseek device. Not quite as famous as the ENIAC, but it looks pretty impressive. Looks like it used servo motors or whatever. Oh, it could even graph things, it looks like. I guess it could graph numbers, turn numbers into graphs. That's pretty handy. There's the whole ENIAC taking up a huge room. Now the ENIAC, some people who are negative would call that thing a failure because it just required vacuum tubes to be replaced continuously. So you had to have a whole team of humans continuously maintaining it 24/7, constantly replacing vacuum tubes and other components to keep it operating. Probably greasing it up, oiling it up, and replacing burned out components constantly. But nevertheless, it did its job. The first real mainframe computer, I don't know if you can call it a mainframe, 1942. Really the first electronic computer used vacuum tubes to run the ones and zeros, just like modern computers use silicon computer chips to do that. Here's portions of the original actual ENIAC right here before our eyes. The actual first famous large electronic computer that could actually calculate, and you could run programs through it. And you had to change those dang vacuum tubes continuously with an entire team of humans to keep it operating. Here's another human-powered mechanical machine to measure two-dimensional shapes on a plane by tracing the shape's perimeter with a pointer, which moves a measuring device. You see lots of tiny, precise little meters in there. And the precise little pointer. Here's a nifty device we never heard of, the Medida. Hope you don't get your wires crossed with that one. Magnetic drum digital difference analyzer, prototype by Northrop of 1949.
for nuclear missile design. More crossed wires. This is before they learned how to, run the wires straight. There's a patch panel, so humans would have been moving these patches, wires. In fact, I believe the ENIAC and all the early computers, you had to manually go in and move wires when you program new things. So when you did your high-end math back then in 1933, if you were lucky, you could use one of these differential equation machines that would do the differential equations for you. Here's more pieces of the actual ENIAC computer, really the first famous computer that took up an enormous room.
Colossus had many features now associated with digital computers. Some regard it as the first digital computer. In 1991, Tony Sale, a British expert on World War II code breaking, gathered a team to rebuild Colossus and see it restored to its rightful place in history.
All I had initially to go on were 8 black and white photographs taken in 1945 and 10 fragments of circuit diagram kept illegally by engineers, as engineers always do.
With advice from Tommy Flowers and others, the Colossus rebuild was completed.
So Colossus was arguably the first electronic computer. And here was the code breaking, the Enigma machine, which the Nazis used to encode their communications of World War II. This one is in quite perfect, like new condition. And this is what the British programmer was able to crack using some much bigger computers. Alan Turing was able to crack it and help save the world from Adolf Hitler. So this teletype or computer entry machine was born the same year as my older brother and allowed you to input and output into a computer and print on paper at the same time. Here's a slightly smaller, more modern mainframe computer, I suppose. The reason I say mainframe, or I try to point it out, is because that's what I used when I was 12, 13 to program, and then I ended up operating mainframes in the Air Force in the 1980s. This looks like one of the first ones, 1953. Although I don't know if it was quite called a mainframe yet. On second thought, far from being a mainframe, I would say this huge thing right here is probably a very rough equivalent of my TRS-80 pocket computer, but this one is probably slightly less capable. Here's a reconstruction of the Atassanoff-Berry computer, ABC. First built in 1939, and this is a fantastic reconstruction that they created because the first one was probably completely lost and disposed of, except for a few remnants of clues on how to rebuild it. So before there was computer chip memory, you had this fantastic giant cylinder that formed memory for the Manchester Mark I computer of 1950. Each tube could store a whopping 2,560 bits of information. Here's one of the first computers, fast and useful enough to be used by the U.S. Air Force for engineering and scientific calculations. The Harvard Mark III resistor capacitor assembly. Some of the first computers, electric computers, used relays, and here's one of the first pieces to come out of Bell Laboratories. Used 2 tin cans to add 2 binary digits. Modern classical computers use binary digits to do pretty much everything. Here's one of the first binary gates, which would let you have a 1 and a 0 to do calculations of a computer. UNIVAC, here we are. This is, UNIVAC stood for Universal Automatic Computer. It was multi-purpose, and UNIVAC went on to be very famous and turned into Sperry UNIVAC, which I operated the Sperry, or Unisys, what was it, 1160, something like that, in 1987.
Okay, so here's the first time the famous 1952 computer was only designed to handle 2 digits. They needed 3 digits because they were started working with bigger things. So 100 they had to put a 00 because there was just no 3 digit. And then in 1999 at the end, they had the same problem. Computers were made to go up to the date of 1999, and they were forced to go to 2000 even though they did not even have the capacity to do such. That's where we had the, what was it called back then?
Year 2000.
The year 2000 bug, or glitch, or near disaster that some people predicted that was not quite disastrous. So those who are interested in computer business, ENIAC is one of the first, along with IBM. Here's one of the world's first tape drives, magnetic tape drives, 1951. 1960s, tape drives were considered very high tech. My job from 1986 to 1990 largely revolved around tape drives. Putting on magnetic tapes, removing magnetic tapes, starting batch jobs, and running other mainframe computer hardware and software components. So around 1957, the monitor, the television tube more or less, was used in computer monitors for the first time. Here's one right here. It gives you a display that's only about 5 inches across. Okay, I'm told this tube may have used x-rays, maybe sprayed everybody with x-rays while they were trying to look at the monitor. It apparently cost $250,000 in 90,000 pounds in 1958. Very expensive monitor to be sprayed with the x-rays. This looks like one of the first Italian computers. You can see it's very stylish with the red and black and neatly organized into a stylish structure. What do you think about the Italian computer style?
I think the inventor was Italian, but Ferranti was a British company.
Okay, there we go. So even the stylish Italians were owned by the British. So this IBM data processing system control panel looks like it's ahead of its time. It looks very 1960s, but that was created in 1957, so they were ahead of their time in the modern futuristic styling here in 1957, IBM 709. All right, this is an important company, both with myself, and when I used a Control Data Corporation computer in the late 70s to learn programming at Cal State Long Beach. My friend George worked at Control Data in the 1960s. So here was a style in 1956. It looks 1950s until IBM brought things into the future a year later with this very 1960s looking control panel. Very impressive from IBM. This enormous beast over here is a targeting computer for 1960s Vietnam era. Okay, so IBM was getting so big, and by the 50s, looks like, weapons direction, that they built a physical miniature model to show their enormously huge IBM Sage installation. What does Sage stand for? The installation was so big it required this model just for people to, at a glance, see where everything is in the building. Looks like in time for the Korean War was this Project Whirlwind Sage system. Well, it looks like it was initiated during World War II and then further developed in the 1950s, early 50s. So they needed to make sure that the guns, the weapons, the nuclear weapons and all that good stuff was aimed properly, and here was the device to do it. The Weapons Director 2 from IBM Sage. I guess you don't want to be targeted with that pointing device right there. Looks like it has a cigarette lighter, convenient for your smoking pleasure while you're targeting people. Smoke them if you got them. Here's more Sage. Beautiful targeting computers with voltmeters for your targeting pleasure. Oh, we're back to vacuum tubes. I guess we never left the vacuum tubes because there they are right there. Hidden in the back. The Sage Logic Unit from IBM 1958. Here's a sleek 1950s device
for monitoring activity. Everything's well hidden in this thing. All right, what did Mercedes do? Oh, was Mercedes the first to put in a computer for anti-lock brakes, apparently? 1978, anti-lock brake controller, Mercedes. Oh, looks like something similar was used in 1982 for the first pacemaker. Automatic computing gun sight for aircraft bombers B-17 in the 1940s. So they were able to hit their targets in Nazi Germany and basically destroy the whole country until they gave in and submitted. Okay, here's some early guidance for guided missiles. This is what does the guiding on the guided missile, the calculations. So yeah, you don't want to be hit by one of these missiles because it just might hit its target. Here's the famous IBM 360. This looks around 1970 to 1980, 1962. So again, the IBM was ahead of its time, 1961. And here's those fantastic tape drives that I mentioned earlier, along with the newer technology, hard drives. Speaking of hard drives, later on in 2000s, the iPod would be using a hard drive, much smaller. Here's one of the first calculators, electronic calculators, 1965. It's the ENIAC of pocket calculators. Was that by Fairchild or Victor? By Victor. Here we go. This is where we are today, Silicon Wafer. And we're in the Silicon Valley. This is where it gets its name, from this device right here. 32,000 word magnetic core memory, 1978. 32,000 words. These days you need about, 32 trillion words to do AI. There's another type of old computer memory, delay lines. They just put in some electricity and just trap it in these wires. And that was your early memory from 1955, used in radar to put in the new radar blips and kick out the old radar blips. Magnetic drums, one of the first magnetic drums, memory, 1948. Used by the ancient Incans in the 1400s. They used strings to remember things. Very high tech, yet low tech. Oh yeah, the Inca had a huge giant civilization which required keeping a lot of records. So they used different lengths of strings and with different knots to keep records of different things. Foundation of the Incan Empire. Something tells me that the Spanish conquistador had maybe a slightly better computer when they wiped out the Incas and the Aztecs.
Could you access information stored on this paper tape from 1975? This family history on an 8-inch floppy disk? Or this floppy from 2000? Programs to decode the digital bits may no longer run. And if a company goes out of business or chooses to no longer support a program, it can be lost.
This was apparently a copycat of the famous IBM System 360. And the copycat that built this was apparently Gene Amdahl of the not quite as famous Amdahl computer. Ooh, it looks like Fujitsu helped them out. Amdahl Fujitsu. And the moment we've been waiting for, the computer we've been waiting for, the first mainframes. Big business with big needs required big computers. Economies of scale favored large, consolidated computer systems. Demand for big computers just when second-generation transistor-based computers were replacing vacuum tube machines in the late 50s, spurred developments in hardware and software. Manufacturers commonly built small numbers of each model, targeting narrowly defined markets. So, is this the first mainframe computer right here? The Nippon Electric Company? Was it Japan that made the first mainframe computer using transistors? Why are they called mainframes? No one knows for sure. There was no mainframe inventor who coined the term. Mainframe originally referred to the frames designed for telephone switches, holding processor circuits and main memory, separate from racks or cabinets holding other components. Over time, mainframe came to mean big computer. Looks like Fortran was the first programming language. Algol, COBOL.
Started there, but I went backwards.
Me too. I started there and went backwards. More Fortran. Perl. Oh, there's Python. JavaScript and Python. C++. We got JavaScript, Python, but C#. Stops in 2000. That's why there's no Solidity or Motoko or Rust.
Fortran. Programmers can now express familiar scientific formulas and logical instructions in statements that make sense to them.
All right, here it is, the first famous supercomputer, the Cray 1. And we have a real Cray 1 right here. In person, my first time seeing an actual Cray 1 supercomputer. The first famous supercomputer, Seymour Cray. There he is, 1976. I think I first heard about the Cray 1 in 1978, but did not have access to one until the year 2025. Very high tech for 1975. There's a functioning copy of the computer stuffed into a small card. Here's the Cray 2. Control data, CDC 160, 1962. DEC PDP-8 is a predecessor to the PDP-11, which I think was the most famous DEC mainframe computer. Here it is, the PDP-1120, very, very famous computer for people in the early 70s. We're very familiar with that one. And that's the one that I believe I used at Cal State Long Beach to learn programming. This PDP-1120 is a mini computer. We had a RSTS, Ristus, and Cyber. One of those was PDP-1120. I forgot which one, the Cyber or the Ristus. I gotta ask AI to remember. Okay, so if your kitchen did not have this in 1989, then you were not benefiting from a modern kitchen. So this thing was actually in the Neiman Marcus catalog in 1969. So now we know why the Neiman Marcus catalog became so famous. Why would anyone want a computer at home? The 1969 Christmas catalog featured the kitchen computer for $10,600. You got the computer, a cookbook, apron, 2-week programming course. Wow. Not surprisingly, none were sold. Remember when Wang became famous in the 70s? And I think they shrunk down and modernized things. All right, here's Moore's Law that shows the exponential parabolic growth of computing and memory and all that good stuff. Transistors incorporated into a chip will double in every 24 months, as proven by this line here. And then I think the world explodes once you get past the tip of that point there. Here's a more in-depth look at how the vacuum tube did the first computing of the 20th century. A vacuum tube allows a small signal to control a larger one. It boil off electrons into a vacuum. Those electrons pass through a grid which control their flow. The electrons strike an anode plate and absorbed. So by designing the cathode grids and plate circuits properly, the tube will either amplify or switch. After the vacuum tube came the transistor. In the 1960s and 70s, I remember US fighter jets were operating with transistors, whereas the Soviet jets were still using vacuum tubes. Here's the first popular transistor radio, Regency TR1. You take your radio with you wherever you went for the first time. When I first went to the Byte shop, BYTE shop in Long Beach, which was really the first Apple computer store, it was also the first computer store pretty much, and this is one of the computers we would see in there, the now iconic PET computer, which is used whenever you want to show that cool 1980s linear design. And I remember the Speak and Spell. My friend's upper middle class family could afford one for their baby, so I played with theirs in the late 70s. And Sinclair. My first computer was the other model that came, I think, before this or after, but it was very cheap because it was only about $100 to $200, and I got it on like closeout for $30. My first computer. So here's one of the tools used to make the teeny tiny microchips. Got to have microscopic production facilities, and this microscopic scribing machine is one of those. Now we're into robots. Here's one of the first robots, 1968. Shaky. Shaky was perhaps kind of famous around the time that I was born. This robot was born. There's some fantastic other robots from 1981 to 1985. One of the first police robots. Heathkit Hero, this is pretty famous for people who like Heathkit and put together their own robot. Omnibot by Tomy, I remember that one from 1985. You had to have a relatively large amount of money to buy those things back then. Big Track, looks pretty cool. I think I wanted one of those, but I think it was a bit out of our budget.
Around this time, innovators saw potential in consumer markets. In the late 70s and early 80s, two new home computers, both with color displays, hit the market. The Apple II personal computer and the Commodore 64 personal computer. Both gave users easy ways to explore this new field on their own.
Okay, 1963, San Jose State University professor used a computer to draw art with this plotter. 30 years later, I would use a computer with a cutter plotter to create signs with my brother. Here it is, the Pixar image computer of 1986. Later go on to help Pixar and Disney to create some fantastically famous movies. There's a famous Atari joystick, which I used for many countless hours, along with millions of other kids in the 1980s. Oh, there it is, the famous Altair 8800. So that was kind of the first home computer, semi-affordable computer that people could buy and put together, I think, in a kit. It could be programmed, but it could not do very much, but it was the first real affordable computer that people could get at home. But it did inspire people to create the first computer that was more like a user-friendly consumer experience. It inspired Steve Jobs and Wozniak to create the Apple computer. Here it is, the Apple I. This was that first user-friendly computer. That was the idea, inspired by the Altair. What was it called, the Altair? But the Altair couldn't do much, it just had some blinking lights. So they said, let's do a little bit more than the blinking lights. Let's do something that could be hooked up to a monitor where you could see things and all that stuff, and build it into a computer. You can build it at home. So it was a better kit that you could build, and people generally made it out of wood like that. And then after that would come something that would be more like a home appliance later. Computers for everybody. So for me, this is it right here. These three computers were the beginning, the foundation of my computer career in the late 1970s. Beginning firstly with this one right here, the best, Apple II. So this was the first computer to be created for home use, for everyone to use. So you did not have to be a computer geek to use it and to get a lot out of it for work and for play. It was a self-contained, already pre-built appliance that you could just purchase, take home, and start using it. This is the first one. This is the first one that had color. I think it had some rudimentary sound as well. You could program your own programs on it, but you could also buy programs, games, and utilities. And I think like a year later, they came out with VisiCalc in 78 or 77 to 79. VisiCalc was a spreadsheet, now known as Excel for the PC, first created by IBM a few years later. But the Apple II, my friend, I talked him into talking his mother into buying one for him. And so I was able to use their Apple II, plus use the Apple II computer in the Byte Shop, which this computer was prominently displayed in the Byte Shop, which unfortunately had a tape built in, but these cassette tapes for programs was terrible at best, awkward and unfortunate, because it would take you forever to load it, and then after you took forever to load it, it would not always be loaded. So you really had to spring for another $500 to get yourself a floppy disk drive. And then if you could afford it, $1,000, so you could get 2 drives to be able to copy software and data. All right, and then if you went to the Radio Shack store, you'd find this TRS-80, which was just black and white, but it was similar to the Apple II in its functionality. And later on, they would come out with the TRS-80 color computer, which was more competitive with the Apple. So the Apple II, which I was fortunate enough to be able to play with for hours on end in the Byte Shop, Long Beach, BYTE, Byte Shop, Long Beach, not far from California State University, where we were able to use mainframe and mini computers to learn programming in the late 1970s when I was only 12, 13 years old. Then right after that, Atari came out with the Atari 800, which really was a fantastic computer because it not only competed against the Apple II computer, but also against the, for gaming. It had the Atari and the computer both in one. So that was really popular and very convenient for the end of the 1970s. Then later in the Air Force, we were using IBM PC computers to do some various administrative tasks. And that was right after my friends who had a little bit more money. They bought a IBM PC in 1983, 1984. So they were ahead of their time. They first showed me in 1983, 84 Windows. They go, hey, look, there's this thing called Windows. It's this new thing. It's amazing. It's called Windows, and look at it. It lets you, run several software at the same time. They showed it to me, and I was glad to see it, although it was not visibly impressive. It was one of the first versions of Windows. In 1990, when I was done with the Air Force, we started our business with a IBM PC clone, a 386 or 486. Used it to make signs and banners and window lettering and boats, banners, trucks, windows, walls, graphics. This is what we used in the Air Force for administrative and certain computing tasks of the 1980s. Actual IBM PC, the original, the real deal. I think it was based on the 8088. The Apple II is such an important, momentous, and historic appliance that they've got it in here twice because it's super popular to look at, because this really is the first successful home computer on a large scale, mass marketing, and made Apple computer what it is today. But just before the Apple II computer was a device like this. That would have been the commercial unit for inside like restaurants and arcades. Or this one looks very preliminary. I did play with something like this in as early as 1975. A friend had a Pong game, even before these two. Right before that, Super Pong by Atari was a Pong game console just like that my friend had, and let me borrow it, and I played it on our television. It might not have even had any sound. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't, but it was fun and it was very high tech and very lucky to be able to be one of the first people in the world to play Pong. You can play it right now. Looks like it takes 2 people. Where's Dick? Let's go get him.
Never played Pong.
All right, so I'm playing one-handed. It's just like tennis. Let's go faster. There you go, you almost got it. Next time you'll get it. Just go faster. Oh, let's try it one more time. Move that thing, spin that thing like you mean it. Put it in the middle and then... You did it! Yay! Oops, see, Dick's winning because I'm playing one-handed. Oh, I got it. Oh, too slow. 1-1, we're even. Anybody could win. It's anyone's game now. One-handed Corey against too slow Dick. Got it. Oh, Dick's ahead. Oh, we're even again. This is anybody's game. Anything could happen. Who is the worst player? One-handed Corey or too slow Dick? We will find out who's worse. Oh! Yay! I barely won. Great. Well, I feel good. I could beat Dick with one hand tied behind my back.
Where do you think my other hand was?
A server Google was using in 1999 when they were new, just taking off. LexisNexis. This is what you needed to use in the 1980s to look up information before the internet. If you wanted to, if you were a law firm or a news agency, you would have one of these. Here you go. Before I started using computers, when I was a baby, this is the phone that we had in our house, and most American homes had this telephone. Then around 1968, you could go ahead and connect it to your computer with this modem. Hey, there's Al Gore inventing the internet. So we have concrete proof that Al Gore invented the internet. It's right here in black and white. What? This man who says Al Gore did not invent the internet. Why do you say that Al Gore, that display over there is incorrect? And Al Gore said himself he created the internet.
I was one of the engineers that actually made it work.
Okay, so this gentleman says he created the internet and not Al Gore. Is that what you're saying, sir?
Yes.
Very good. And what year was that?
1982. He's saying 1991 for the Communications Act. I think full 8 years later.
Right, so you, the actual real creator of the internet, were a full 8 years before Al Gore, the fake creator.
Creator of the networks that form the basis of it, yes.
So my job over the past 30 years has been to combine computers and marketing. So pretty much every facet of marketing and computers and the internet, and old-fashioned marketing as well, all the print stuff, and audio, visual, film, radio, TV, film, and put it all into one head. It's all in here. As I wander these halls, surrounded by over 100,000 artifacts that scream human triumph, I see the direct line to Entar's transformation. This museum isn't just history, it's a blueprint for the future. Operation Entar Explosion draws straight from these miracles, integrating AI-driven valuations, virtual property tours that feel hyper-real, and blockchain finance that secures deals in nanoseconds. We're not just catching up to AI's exponential pace, we're leaping ahead, turning Entar into the undisputed leader in real estate and financial tech. If these exhibits prove anything, it's that the impossible becomes inevitable when bold minds dare to compute. Silicon Valley, you've inspired me. Now watch Entar explode into the stratosphere.
Can I interview you?
Absolutely. Ask away. I'm ready for your questions.
Will you go to hell?
Well, that's a new destination suggestion.